People think a wedding falls apart loudly. Mine didn't. It fell apart quietly, on a Tuesday afternoon over a spreadsheet, 3 weeks before I was supposed to walk down an aisle in a dress I'd already paid off in full. I'm 31. My fiancé, I'll call him Ryan, is 33. We got engaged 14 months ago after 3 years together, and from the outside, we look like the couple everyone points to and says, "See, it does work out sometimes." No big fights, no trauma. Just two people who liked planning a life together. My mother used to tell her friends, only half joking, that we were boring in the best way. I used to agree with her. I work in event operations for a mid-size hotel group. If you don't know what that means, I spend my week reading contracts, chasing deposits, and reconciling vendor invoices down to the cent. I've built seating charts for 400 guests with 3 days' notice. I've untangled catering disputes where two departments both swore they'd paid the same invoice. The job teaches you exactly one commandment: trust the paper trail, not the person. I have applied that commandment to every wedding I've ever staffed professionally. I did not apply it to my own. I want that on the record before I tell you the rest, because for a long time I assumed the reason I never caught anything was that there was nothing to catch. Ryan works in medical device sales, which meant travel. A lot of it. 3 or 4 cities a month. The kind of job where I'm stuck at the airport is a believable excuse roughly 9 times out of 10. I never thought about the 10th. When we got engaged, we split the wedding planning the way a lot of couples do. I handled logistics, catering, invitations, my dress, the timeline. And he handled his side, which meant his family's contribution, his groomsmen's suits, and the venue, because his parents were covering the reception hall as their gift to us, and it felt right that he'd be the point of contact for that piece. We agreed to split the deposit 60-40, his family covering the larger share. Clean lines, or so I believed for the better part of a year. Before I get to the spreadsheet, you need the context, because none of this makes sense without it. Ryan dated a woman named Priya for 2 years before me. They broke up about 8 months before he and I met, and by the time we were serious, the story I'd been given was tidy. They'd grown apart, ended things amicably, and barely spoke anymore. Whenever her name came up, and it did occasionally because they had overlapping friends from grad school, he'd wave it off with the same phrase every time. Ancient history, we don't even talk. I believed him because I had no reason not to. She lived 2 states away. She didn't like or comment on anything of his online, which I'd checked exactly once, early on, the way you do. Their mutual friends never brought her up in a way that felt loaded. If anything, the silence around her felt like proof the whole thing really was over. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out for another 1.5 years, was that ancient history is a phrase people use exclusively about things that are still very much alive. Nobody describes something as truly dead. They just stop mentioning its breathing. 3 weeks before the wedding, our venue coordinator sent me a final reconciliation spreadsheet ahead of the last walkthrough. Completely standard, the kind of email I send to other couples every week of my life. I opened it during my lunch break at my desk, expecting nothing more exciting than confirming the head count for linens. Instead, buried in a column of routine charges, I found a line item dated 11 months earlier, a partial deposit refund of $2,400 issued back to a card ending in the same 4 digits as the one Ryan used for his side of the wedding. Nothing strange about that on its own. Vendors issue partial refunds all the time when a package changes. What stopped me was the destination account listed next to it in the coordinator's internal notes, copied over from the payment processor for her own bookkeeping. It wasn't refunded to Ryan's primary account. It was refunded to a secondary linked account, a shared rewards account, still active, still receiving statements, under 2 names, his and Priya's. I sat there for a long moment doing the math the way I do math at work, slowly, without emotion, assuming first that I was misreading something. I wasn't. The account had been opened years earlier, while they were together, for some joint credit card rewards program neither of them had apparently ever closed. And it wasn't just sitting dormant collecting dust. It had activity on it, recent activity. I didn't say anything to Ryan that night. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't composure, not really, not at first. It was disbelief. I genuinely thought there had to be a boring explanation, a shared points account from years ago that auto-renewed without either of them noticing, a clerical error at the bank, something. So instead of confronting him, I did what I do at work when a number doesn't reconcile. I built a folder. I gave it the most boring name I could think of, Venue Admin, and I started filling it quietly, at night, after he'd gone to sleep. I started by pulling every statement I could access on that shared card going back 2 years, using the online portal Ryan had set up for me months earlier, so you can help track wedding spending, which, in hindsight, is a sentence I now find almost funny. The refund to the shared account wasn't an isolated incident. Once I had the statements in front of me, 4 more transactions jumped out that I didn't recognize, spread out over 18 months. A charge at a spa in Priya's city, marked in the app's own auto-categorization as gift, dated around her birthday. A hotel charge one weekend in the spring, a city neither of our families lived in. A weekend I remembered clearly because Ryan had told me he was at a bachelor party for a college friend. A friend I realized, sitting there at midnight with my laptop open. I had never once met, seen a photo of, or heard mentioned in any context before or since. 2 smaller charges at restaurants in her city, both under $50, both timed to trips he told me were client dinners. None of it was catastrophic on its own. That's what made it worse. It wasn't a smoking gun. It was a pattern. Small, repeated, deniable. The kind of thing built specifically so that if anyone ever noticed, it could be explained away one transaction at a time. It's just a spa gift. We're still friendly. It's just a hotel. I was seeing an old friend from grad school too. I didn't think it was worth mentioning. Death by 1,000 reasonable explanations. I sat with that folder for 6 days before I said a word. 6 days of cake tastings, floral mock-ups, seating chart revisions, a final fitting for my dress where the seamstress pinned the waist and told me I looked beautiful, and I smiled and thanked her and thought about spa charges the entire time. I want to be honest. Those 6 days were some of the worst of my life, not because I was plotting anything elaborate, but because I genuinely didn't know yet whether I was about to blow up my entire life over something explainable or whether I already knew exactly what I was looking at and just wasn't ready to say it out loud. By day 5, I stopped hoping for the boring explanation. On day 7, I sat him down after dinner with nothing visible in my hands. No printouts, no phone open to the statement, nothing to react to yet. Just a question. Is the card with Priya still open? I want you to notice what he didn't do. He didn't ask which card. He didn't ask what I meant. A person with nothing to hide asks for clarification because the question is genuinely confusing to them. He just went very still, the fork halfway to his mouth, and set it down slowly, and said, "It's not what you think." It never is, until it's exactly what you think. What followed was probably the longest conversation of our relationship, and I'll spare you most of it, because a lot of it was him circling the same 3 excuses in different orders. The account, he said, had never fully closed because neither of them had gotten around to it, as if a joint financial account is a gym membership you forget to cancel, rather than something you have to actively decide, more than once, to keep. The spa charge was, in his words, just a gift. We're still friendly. It's not a big deal. The hotel was the one he struggled with the most. First, it was a work trip he'd combined with catching up with an old friend. When I asked why he'd told me a completely different story about a bachelor party that weekend, he went quiet for almost a full minute before saying, quietly, "I didn't think you'd understand." Nothing physical, he told me, arms out like that detail was supposed to be the mercy in the room. Just checking in, just old habits, and this was the phrase that finally broke something loose in me. We never really stopped being close. I just didn't think it mattered since it's not like anything happened. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry in front of him, not that night. What I did was ask one more question, the only one that actually mattered to me by that point. Would you have told me any of this if I hadn't found the spreadsheet? He didn't answer. That was the answer. I've spent 9 years of my career being the person who fixes what's broken in someone else's plans, quietly and without drama, because that's what the job requires. I applied every bit of that training to my own life over the next 48 hours, and I'm not going to pretend that wasn't at least partly deliberate. Getting organized was the only thing that felt like solid ground. The next morning, before I'd even decided anything long-term, I called our venue coordinator and, as the person of record on the majority of our vendor contracts, formally requested that all future correspondence, invoices, and any refunds route to my name and my card only going forward. This wasn't spite. It's genuinely how it should have been set up from the start, given that I was the one who'd actually been managing the account week to week. It took about 40 minutes on the phone. By lunch, every vendor with a deposit on file, florist, caterer, photographer, the string quartet we'd booked for the ceremony, had a single point of contact, and it wasn't him. Then I called my sister, not Ryan, and asked her to come with me to the travel agency to deal with the honeymoon. We'd booked a joint reservation months earlier, both our names on the flights and the resort. I canceled the joint booking entirely and rebooked a single refundable flight under my name only, with the dates left open, no destination decided. My sister asked if I wanted her to book 2 seats instead of 1. I told her I didn't know yet. That was the most honest thing I said to anyone that whole week. I also did something I'm slightly less proud of, only because it wasn't strictly necessary, but it made me feel like myself again for the first time in 6 days. I pulled the full 18 months of statements into one clean document, time-stamped, organized by category, the exact way I'd build a reconciliation report at work for a client who needed to understand where their money had actually gone versus where they'd been told it went. I didn't need it for a lawyer. I didn't need it for anyone but me. I needed to see the whole picture in one place, in my own handwriting, so to speak, instead of living inside of his version of events for one more day. Ryan noticed the vendor changes within a day, coordinators mentioning to him that all future emails would go through me, our travel agent calling him to confirm the honeymoon cancellation. He called it cruel. He called it an overreaction to a friendship that didn't mean what I thought it meant. At one point, he actually said I was punishing him for forgetting to close an old account, as if forgetting to close an account and continuing to use it for spa gifts and hotel rooms were remotely the same category of accident. I told him the truth as plainly as I could, because by that point, I didn't have the energy left to soften it. I wasn't punishing him. I was doing to our wedding exactly what I do to every account that stops reconciling at work. I froze it, I documented it fully, and then I decided, calmly, on my own terms, without him in the room talking over the numbers, whether it was worth rebuilding at all. His mother called me twice that week. I didn't answer either time. His sister, who I genuinely liked, sent one text that just said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know," which I believed and still believe. Priya, for what it's worth, never reached out to me at all. I don't know what that means. I've decided I don't need to know. The wedding didn't happen, not because of one screaming match or one dramatic scene at the altar. There was no altar, in the end, no scene for anyone to witness. It simply had nothing left to walk into, because I'd spent those 48 hours making sure every piece of it was accounted for, closed out, and cleanly settled before I let myself feel any of it. Every vendor got paid exactly what they were owed. The dress got sold to a consignment shop 2 towns over, still in its garment bag, tags still on the alterations. The $2,400 deposit refund that started this entire unraveling turned out to be the smallest amount he ever owed me an honest explanation for. I moved into my sister's guest room for 2 months while I found my own place. I still work the same job. I still build spreadsheets for a living, and I still believe, more than ever, in that one commandment: trust the paper trail, not the person. Except now I know it applies at home just as much as it applies at a desk. People keep asking, in the comments on an earlier version of this that I posted somewhere else, whether I regret not confronting him the second I opened that spreadsheet. I don't. I've spent my whole career learning that the person holding the full picture is the person holding the power in any negotiation. And for once, in the most personal negotiation of my life, I wanted to be completely sure of every number before I said a single word out loud. I don't know if that makes me cold. I know it made me right. A routine wedding vendor spreadsheet revealed my fiancé had never closed a shared account with his ancient history ex and had been quietly using it for gifts, hotel stays, and dinners disguised as work trips over 18 months. I spent 6 days quietly building a full financial picture instead of confronting him immediately, then redirected every vendor contract to my name, canceled the joint honeymoon, and called off the wedding, calmly, with a complete paper trail instead of a scene.